welcome to the first tutorial on Photoshop. This is our introductory into Photoshop. So I am on a Mac computer, so you'll notice the Apple icon. This may be watched on a PC or a Mac, so there are some differences, but the general things will be the same, and most things will be the same. And for most of all purposes with Photoshop, all the things I was showing you can be reproduced on either a Mac or a PC. Alright, so here we go. Here's the basics to Photoshop. Let me give you the introductory. So we have 4 different options we can do. So when you open up Photoshop, depending on what version you have, it'll look something like this. Over here you have a toolbar. So this is what we'll call this, and you've got a variety of tools here. And the tools obviously can be changed by clicking on them. And if you notice, a lot of the tools have a little triangle here in the corner, which is showing you that they have multiple tools inside the tool. So if you click and hold down with your mouse or your pen, you'll get some options here to click on different kinds of tools within the tools. So some of them we will use right away, some of them we won't use for a while. Okay, up here you've got a couple things. First, up top you've got your file menu. Just like most programs, you've got file somewhere in the beginning and file new, which you should get to know where that is right away. But you also have a variety of other menus: edit, image, blah blah blah, and lots of other ones. Just so you know, when we're talking about the file menu, that's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about this up here. It could be it could be something like go to the file menu, or go to the edit menu, go to the image menu, or I might say go to the file menu under image, and that's what I would mean this right here. Okay, so we have the tools, you've got your file menus, below that you've got your tool options. Okay, so this bar is called the tool options bar, and it's got different options for all these tools. So as you may have already noticed, as you click on the tool over here in the toolbar, the tool options change depending on what tool you're on. So if I go to this tool, you've got one set of options. If you go to this tool, you got another set of options, and so on and so on. Okay, so you got the toolbar, you have the file menu, the menu up here, and then you've got the tool options bar. Okay. And lastly, you've got windows. Now, when you open up Photoshop for the first time, your windows may look in a variety of different ways. And windows are they are changing all the time, and depending on what you do to them. So you're going to open up certain windows, close certain windows. There's a lot of different windows in Photoshop, and if all of them are open at once, it would clutter up your space too much. So you've got windows that can be taken away and put back, and don't ever be worried if you can't find a window, or if you don't see a window. You can always go over to window here under the file menu for window, and you can click on your window like layers there, and it'll bring it up. So let me get your windows set up. So I'll tell you what to do here. If your windows are small icons, you may want to open them up and close them for now. So like some of these windows, which are very useful, like character and paragraph, I'm going to close because I don't need them right now. Okay, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to keep my layers open. I also want history open. All right, sometimes history is closed. Obviously, we just go here to history and open it up. Mine is open. It's just behind layers, which is kind of exactly where I want it. I want it right there, so I go back and forth. I always want my layers open. I'll make this a little bit smaller here by grabbing the end. Okay, so besides that, I do want my color open. All right, so I'm going to bring my color out for now. Adjustment layers I'm going to put away. Now, again, depending on what version of Photoshop you have, you might not have all these windows open. You might have different windows open, or they may look a little bit differently. That's okay. You can still grab them and close them. Okay, so color, layer, history. Another one I want to pull out is called swatches. So here we go. I'm going to click on swatches, and there's swatches. Okay, so I'm going to set swatches over here. I'm going to set my color over here for now, and then layers and history right there. And that should be most of the things I need for my initial run through of Photoshop. Another thing to notice about the windows, and just pointing out that windows have more options within them as well. The way to get to them is to hit this little button right here. Now, there's a lot of little buttons here. It's not this top one. This top one will close it out, or make it, I'm sorry, not close it out, but make a smaller version of it. But it's right below that, up in the right-hand corner, and here you'll have a bunch of different options. So I would also advise that under color, to switch it to HSB if it's not already. Usually it'll start in something like RGB if nobody's used this version of Photoshop yet on your computer, if it's a new user, but I want you to switch it to HSB. Okay, a few things about Photoshop. So Photoshop is what I would call a professional program, not a consumer program, okay? A consumer-based program would be something you would find like on your iPad, or an easier version of Photoshop, things on your phone, iMovie, GarageBand, things like that would be consumer programs. Very easy to use. Apps in your iPad or your phone are very easy to use. You pick it up and you just start using it. Photoshop is a bit harder, in my opinion, but it can do a lot more. So it's a professional program, meaning there's very few programs, if any, better than this one. Photoshop is one, if not the top program to do any kind of photo editing or pixel editing. It is the one that kind of started and set the bar for image programs. So that being said, it's a little bit hard to use, and some things are not quite as obvious, like these little buttons over here in the corner. But as you get used to Photoshop, you'll be able to do pretty much anything to a 2D image that you can think of. It's just a matter of figuring out how. Okay, so that is the basics of the layout of Photoshop. So let me show you one more thing that I'd like you to do before we get going here. We can save our setup. So if I go to Window, Workspace here, you can see it's under Essentials Default, but I've just changed it so it really isn't Essentials Default anymore. I'm going to save it. I'm going to hit New Workspace, and then I can name it, and I'm going to call this one Salazar Paint, because this is my setup for painting things. I'm going to hit Save. I'm going to just ignore these for now. I'm whether I can set that up as well, but I'm going to just ignore that. And now under Window, under Workspace, it should say Salazar Paint somewhere. There it is, Reset Salazar Paint. That way, if something changes, like it goes to a different setup, if somebody else uses it and Photoshop is set up differently, you can go to, hopefully find Salazar Paint, and it'll take you back to what you're used to. Okay, and the last thing we're going to do is go over here to under Photoshop, go to Preferences, and I want you to go to Performance. And under Performance, generally you're going to leave everything alone here. You don't really want to mess with these things. But the one thing I do want you to mess with is look for History States. Now this box may look a little different, once again, depending on what version of Photoshop you have, but in whatever one you've got, you should be able to see History States somewhere. And I want you to put it to somewhere around 200, okay? Photoshop defaults at about 20, which means 20 things you can go back to in terms of steps, but 20 brushstrokes goes pretty fast, okay? So I want you to take that and slide it up or type in 200, anywhere around there, and that'll be plenty for most situations in terms of being able to go back 200 steps, okay? So if you don't understand what I'm talking about, don't worry about it yet. Just go ahead and trust me and go ahead and hit 200 here, or go somewhere around 200 and hit OK. And then you are pretty much ready to go for lesson 1. All right, that wraps it up for setup, and I'll see you in the next lesson.